Hey guys, in light of the new show, The Boston Strangler on Hulu, which I watched and I thought it was very well done. I really like older true crime shows that are based in, the 60s, 70s, even the 50s, and I love the way they did the show. I thought it was very believable and very realistic. It got a few bad reviews, but if you're into true crime and you're interested in the Boston Strangler case, I think you would enjoy the show.
The city is for some glamorous, stimulating, prosperous. Only recently has it become dangerous.
Jack, I think I found something. 3 women were strangled over the last 2 weeks.
You're on the lifestyle desk. You're not covering a homicide.
I think the murders are connected.
Another woman was strangled. Just came over the wire.
I'm killed in the follow-up. You don't have a story.
How many women have to die before it's a story?
They just confirmed number 4.
Police aren't talking. Never seen them this tight-lipped about anything.
I don't care if it's 1 killer or 4. We're gonna catch whoever did this.
Do you have any suspects? Boston police, hands on the wall.
We had him. We just let him walk away.
Everything lines up with him. His history, the progression of the crimes, everything.
You know how many people I've gone down the rabbit hole with? It's a dead end every time with this case.
What do you think you're gonna find out there? When is this gonna stop, Loretta?
I need you to call in a favor.
Be quick. I don't want to get fired tonight.
Any lawyer worth a dime would pick this apart.
You really want to use this paper to tear down the police department?
If anyone else was blowing it this badly, we'd have put it on the front page a long time ago.
I need you to take down an address. If I don't call back in an hour, give it to the police.
Loretta, there's more than one lunatic out there, and you're going to get us both killed.
Your safe little world is just delusion.
The Boston Strangler is a serial killer who strangled 13 women in Boston in the years from 1962, 1963 to 1964. This guy would talk his way into homes. He was very well-spoken. He was good-looking. He would say he worked for the superintendent or the apartment or the building, and he was there to do some sort of work. Test this, test that, check the plumbing, check the furnace, whatever. And the women let him in. A lot more women let him in than the 13 he killed. Some of those women survived. He was only convicted of a rape or something like that, and he never really went to prison for the Boston Strangler murders. But they finally did get a DNA hit later, recent times, where they connected him to, I think, Mary Sullivan, one of the victims. And I believe he is the Boston Strangler. He confessed to being the Boston Strangler. Albert DeSalvo is who we're talking about. Again, he started killing in 1962, and he ended up, his last victim was Mary Sullivan in 1964. And ironically, that's the victim his DNA was tied to. Almost every victim was attacked, either raped or sexually assaulted, not every time, but a lot of times. And then he would like to strangle them to death with either their robe, the cord on their robe, the belt of their robe, or he would strangle them with their nylons, their stockings.
The city is for some glamorous, stimulating, prosperous. Only recently has it become dangerous. 5 young girls have been strangled in the Boston area in little over a year. The stranglings have become the chief topic of conversation between housewives on the telephone, co-eds between classes, and secretaries during coffee breaks. Some carry heavy ashtrays and other artifacts suitable for throwing, and karate and jiu-jitsu courses are becoming very popular. One karate course is advertised as a must for city living.
It would have made a frightening Hitchcock thriller if the crimes hadn't been real. A killer was stalking Boston women, raping and strangling them. In the most grotesque manner, he would display his work, and he always left a bizarre calling card, a nylon tied in a granny knot around the neck of each victim.
They were devastating crimes. They compare in the annals of
crime, they compare absolutely with Jack the Ripper. Perhaps even worse because they were quiet and they were deadly.
The Stranglers' first victim was Anna Slessers, a 55-year-old divorcee, brutally beaten and strangled while a parade passed down her Back Bay street. From June 1962 until January 1964, 10 more women would die the same way. They were young and old, black and white. As the number of victims grew, police became more and more frustrated. No woman felt safe. An intense investigation ensued. Police even brought in a psychic, but their efforts brought no hard leads. It wasn't until 11 months after the last strangling, purely by chance, Cambridge police arrested a conman and rapist named Albert DeSalvo on unrelated charges. DeSalvo confessed to be the strangler. Attorney F. Lee Bailey came in to defend him. DeSalvo related details of the crime no one but the killer could have known. Even though DeSalvo had confessed, police had no hard evidence tying him to the stranglings. These were the days before sophisticated fingerprint and DNA tests. DeSalvo was convicted on unrelated rape charges and sent to jail. Some investigators...
Why?
Reporter John Henning covered the Strangler story.
I think he did some of them, but I think there were some copycats, and I think a man named George Nasser, who was Albert's cellmate, might have done a couple of them too. Some of the attorneys always thought that. F. Lee Bailey did, who defended DeSalvo in the crimes that he was convicted for, the assault.
Albert DeSalvo was found dead on this cot, stabbed 20 times by other inmates. But before his death, Boston detectives recorded several hours of tape with DeSalvo. In one section, he pleads with psychiatrists to examine him and analyze his behavior. A chilling message from the grave now about his perverse but never understood mind.
Some idea might be gotten out of what happened to me. If this will help only one, we've accomplished something. There are many out there. There are many fathers and sons out there that are Albert DeSalvos at a given time.
A couple things that the show probably wouldn't say. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I'm not sure if I remember this, but he would also pose the bodies. He would spread the legs of the victims towards the door to shock the first responders. He made sure the victims didn't have any clothing on. Their genitals were pointing towards the door to shock whoever would find the body. He would also insert objects and also them with different objects. I think one of the victims had a broom handle or something like that inserted into her body. He was a very vicious killer. He was a lust killer, but he was also very angry. I think he's an anger retaliatory killer as well. Albert DeSalvo was finally arrested. There was a couple more crimes tied to him, but they later on decided those weren't part of the Boston Strangler crimes. And DeSalvo confessed, and he said some things, and he gave them details that no one else would know. He was convicted, not of all the murders, but I think they got him for rape or something, and he went to prison, really lengthy prison sentence. And eventually he was murdered in prison in the early 70s, I think 1973, stabbed to death by another inmate. Some people don't think Albert DeSalvo is the Boston Strangler. I actually believe he is.
Tonight, an I-Team exclusive in a crime that has haunted Boston for more than a half a century. The Boston Strangler terrorized this city.
Albert DeSalvo confessed to the murders, but some doubt that he's the real killer. In a rare jailhouse interview, Sheriff Pandaka sat down with his cellmate and the first person to hear DeSalvo's confession.
The grisly headline-grabbing crimes had some comparing the Boston Strangler to Jack the Ripper.
In the annals of crime, they compare absolutely with Jack the Ripper. Perhaps even worse because they were quiet and they were deadly.
13 women sexually assaulted, some raped, and all strangled with a piece of their own clothing. Albert DeSalvo admitted he was the killer, first confessing to fellow prisoner George Nasser.
He convinced me by the description. He was getting it off his chest. He was the first person apparently to whom he had really spoken about specifics of each crime.
Nasser, now 86 and suffering from terminal cancer, is serving a life sentence for an unrelated murder that he says he didn't commit. In a rare television interview, NASA tells the I-Team he met DeSalvo at Bridgewater State Hospital in 1965 and helped get famed criminal defense attorney F. Lee Bailey to represent him.
We were setting it all up, saying, now you're going to confess, you're going to go to trial, we're going to do due process, you're going to do your book, you're going to take care of your family. And he was saying, okay.
But that wasn't the end of it. News reports from that time suggested because there were so many different victims, DeSalvo may not have been the only strangler.
They were young and old, black and white. As the number of victims grew, police became more and more frustrated. No woman felt safe.
Some investigators began to think of NASA as a possible suspect. Are you the real Boston Strangler?
Of course not. If I had been, theoretically, on the score with Al, we were in criminal conspiracy together, and I found out that he was murdering women and getting away with it, I'd have given him a quick and painless death right there.
NASA says DeSalvo desperately wanted to be famous, and although he was never charged or convicted of the stranglings, NASA has no doubt he was the Strangler.
Oh yeah, positively. Sure.
DeSalvo appeared to relish his notoriety, the I-Team obtaining never-before-seen photos and this video of the leather bags and jewelry he made in prison.
He was getting necklaces, he called them chokers, big funny, big laugh. Everyone had a big laugh. I didn't find that funny at all.
DeSalvo was stabbed to death in prison. No one was ever convicted in his death. Cheryl Pandaka, WBZ News.
And I believe his confession was true. I believe we finally got a real DNA hit to prove he at least tied to one of the victims. And if he didn't do all the victims, if he didn't commit all these murders, if DeSalvo didn't kill all the women in Boston, he definitely raped a lot of women and killed some of them. Now, interesting enough, when Albert DeSalvo went to Walpole Prison, Walpole, Massachusetts, Walpole was the name of the prison, really tough prison, he started making, you're not going to believe this, jewelry that women would wear around their necks. So before he left the crime scene, after the women were dead, he would tie a bow around their neck with their nylons. He would leave a bow. That was his signature. Remember we talked about, in my training class, we talk about signatures and MOs. His modus operandi, his MO, basically how did he do these murders? He targeted older women. Many of them are in their 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. He targeted older women at home. He talked his way into, he probably noticed them at some point, found out where they live. He probably stalked them for a little bit. Then he went to the house, probably make sure there was no men there, make sure they live alone. He talked his way into the house. His MO was to talk his way into the house. His MO was to rape them, murder them, and if he could, he wanted to strangle them. I think some women fought back and he beat them and stabbed some of them, but for the most part, they were strangled with nylons. He then, his signature is to stage the body, possibly insert something into the body, spread the legs, and tie a bow around their neck. That was his signature. That was what we call his calling card. So he went to prison, and ironically, instead of tying bows around women's necks, he makes these necklaces that go around women's necks, right? Here's a picture of DeSalvo at the Walpole prison holding some of his necklaces and jewelry that he made by hand. This was taken, it just says November 26th. Albert DeSalvo, he admitted to the Boston strangling murders, but he was never convicted of them. This photo was taken November 26th. I'm not sure what year. I think it was probably early 70s. But he admitted to being the Boston Strangler, never convicted of these murders. And he started making this jewelry in prison. And people could buy it in the prison store. They also could buy it through the mail. When he was in prison, he sold this jewelry, necklaces, to women. And you could either buy it in the prison shop, the store at the prison at Walpole, or you can buy it through the mail. So very interesting. And here's the really cool thing. He would make a custom jewelry box that he would put the jewelry in before you bought it at the store, at the prison store, or in the mail. And you can see it. This is all done by him. This is a handmade jewelry box by the hands of the Boston Strangler. And you could see his writing there. See if I can get you a good shot of this here. It says Montana picture, a gate, however you say that, necklace. And it says Handmade by Albert DeSalvo, who is the Boston Strangler. And I am lucky enough to own one of those handmade necklaces made by the hands of the Boston Strangler. So I've got a piece of true crime history here. Women would wear around their necks. Maybe some men would buy their women this jewelry and give it to them for Christmas or their birthday or their anniversary. Maybe they told them that the Boston Strangler made it. Maybe they didn't. Wouldn't that be strange? But this is handmade by the hands of the Boston Strangler. There you go.